So let's talk about the obvious problem that we've got in real estate. And once again, it's being caused by realtors overcompensating for a conversation that they simply need education around. Fair housing isn't new to any of us. The rules and laws against steering are not new to any of us. But if you don't consistently educate yourself on the things that you need to be doing to be better, just simply being better, then you're going to get yourself in trouble. And we're going to talk about that today. Do not let the new commission guidelines and the new commission changes that have been in place by the NAR because of their lawsuit to change the way that you're going to do business in a way that puts you or your client at risk. Every real estate agent knows that they have to follow Fair Housing Act law, period. And I say law repeatedly because you need to understand this isn't some rule or regulation. This is the law. There are financial penalties, there are huge legal penalties, there are licensing penalties, and there's jail time attached to some of this if you don't watch yourself. And clients, I'm not just talking to my agents today. I'm trying to protect my agents, but you, Mr. and Mrs. Client, can traditionally put us in these positions too if you don't watch yourself. We're not 50 years ago anymore. The way you talk to each other, the way you just simply don't know how to be nice anymore, is causing this rift in the way human beings interact. We are all legally and ethically obligated to ensure that we have fair treatment and equal access to housing. Failure from a real estate professional's angle to comply with these types of laws violates an agent's fiduciary responsibilities towards a client and violates a protective class. What we're going to talk about today is going to tackle fair housing. We're going to talk about how the real estate industry is prohibited from these type of discrimination activities. I'm going to tell you about the enforcements. I'll scare you a little bit with some statistics, and I'm going to help you comply and make you understand that there is simply a better way to do your job without steering in the wrong directions. Little backstory about the Fair Housing Act. It's United States only federal law that was created as a part of the Civil Rights Act of 1968. It was created to simply prohibit housing discrimination during the sale or the rental or the financing processes that are put into place to accommodate housing. The law applies to single family homes, apartments, condos, and regardless of whether they are sold or rented, they are covered by these laws. The law applies also to mortgage lenders, mortgage lending practices, the insuring of those properties, and the marketing and advertising for housing. There is a nice list of protected classes, and I need you to understand how non-specific they are so that you appreciate that just about everybody is included. People with disabilities, race, sexual orientation, color, national origins, religion, and family status are all documented and set protected classes by the Fair Housing Act. 1974 and 1988, it was amended to include some additional groups of protected classes, and these you need to understand go a little bit deeper and beyond that. But the federally implemented laws that act as a baseline for these states, and I mean all 50 of them, have local governments to create the laws surrounding the Fair Housing Acts as well. So depending on the state you're in, fair housing real estate laws can also be expanded to protect additional classes on top of that. And again, depends on what state you're in, but a federal law was taken to a state level, was taken to an immediate local level. There is now gender expression, gender identity protections, citizenship status, partnership status, so not just single or married. There are people that live together. There are people that still have children together that may have a different partnership availability to them. Lawful occupation, ancestry, sources of their income are protected. Age discrimination is protected against. Domestic violence victim status, genetic information, marital status, medical condition, sexual orientation, military and veteran status, primary languages that are spoken, and in some states, criminal background is also protected by these extensions of those same acts. So what is absolutely prohibited, Alex, and how does this protect me as an agent from getting accused of steering or directly violating any of these acts? You must, as a real estate agent, and as a consumer for that matter, you must understand the Fair Housing Act and the state-specific laws. They are aimed to protect your business and the way you do business and the clients that you do business with. And unfortunately, it is a horrible scenario that the bad that have continuously done this have forced us to have to put these type of rules that should be just logical to the average person. But these real estate discriminatory prohibitions, these are in place to make sure that it covers all housing, and it covers landlords as well, and agents and lenders alike. So let's talk about a few things that will immediately get you in trouble. From a landlord or property owner perspective, if you are refusing to sell or rent housing to any of these classes because you personally have a bias, it's illegal. If you are setting different terms or conditions for the housing that you are selling or renting, because if a certain person in one of these classes shows up and it's something that you have a bias against, also completely illegal. For not making reasonable accommodations for people in properties and tenants, completely illegal. Denying negotiations because you don't want to negotiate with people that are in any of these protected classes, again, that you have bias towards, completely illegal, not allowed. Real estate agents, hear me. These are specifically for you. If you're including a preference in your advertisements for or against any of these protected classes, it's a violation. You will absolutely get in trouble for it. If you're using exclusionary language to deter so that people don't actually inquire about availability in the MLS or outside in your independent advertising, absolutely you'll get in trouble for it. If you're encouraging or deterring clients from a particular neighborhood or a particular type of property, then you will absolutely get written up for these types of things. Potentially lose your license, potentially by the level at which that you committed this crime. There are penalties fiscally and jail time associated. Lenders, and lenders are important to this entire puzzle as well. Without them, most people do not have access to the financing they need to buy a piece of property. So lenders, if you're refusing to do mortgage or financial assistance for a home based on any of these protective classes, you can't do it. There is no gray area, by the way, to any of these. If I can for 1 second make the assumption or make the presumption that this was done against a protected class, you need to make the change immediately. Lenders, if you are declining to provide information regarding loans to create different terms and conditions of services, also, this is a direct violation of the Fair Housing Act. There's always exceptions to all of these laws, and certainly there are a lot of people out there that are also taking advantage of the broad scope of these classifications in hopes of getting a quick payout. And you have to be careful about that too. But the thing that you do need to be most aware of, Fair Housing Act exempts owner-occupied single-family buildings with less than 4 units, for example. There are some additional practices that are in place, but these are well written. A great example is 55 plus communities, for example. They can absolutely, as long as they've done the proper paperwork, they can have their building exempt to people that are of a lesser age than 55 if they have deemed their property a 55 plus community. Now, not just deemed it by hanging a sign in a window, there are local and state jurisdictional paperworks that they do need to fill out, that they do need to have classified, and they've got to have additional concessions for the residents in place to make sure that as a 55 plus community, they're taking care of all of their members equally as well, so that those senior citizens don't get taken advantage of too. Enforcement of the Fair Housing Act is probably a lot easier than you think, and you need to be careful here. The Fair Housing Act empowered the Department of Justice to file lawsuits against individuals or organizations that they feel are in a pattern or practice of discrimination. So again, sure, you might get accused of it once and you might get away with it, but if they detect that this is happening again, and that there are several, if not the same, classes that are accusing you of these practices, believe me, you will get shut down while they do a full investigation really quickly. And as a brokerage, we have an obligation to stop you from doing business while these investigations are taking place. We must fully cooperate. So please don't think that I have an accusation, so now that that's going on, I'll go ahead and continue to do business. No, you are halted from doing any further business while the Department of Justice finalizes an investigation. The U.S. Attorney General will ultimately decide what will constitute a matter of general public importance, but I'm going to tell you, the paperwork is easy. They can do it online. It is simple for them to get these things filled out and ran up the flagpole. So watch yourself, and hopefully this class will give you some more insight into the things that you might be getting a little close to the line on that you may want to start changing your practices on. The Department of Justice under these acts can sue under the Fair Housing Administration for systematic mortgage discrimination, or if a group's denial of rights raises public concern, they can even raise criminal charges when discrimination involves force or threats. Individuals, and these are our clients, individuals who believe that they have been discriminated against can directly file a complaint with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the HUD, or they can initiate legal proceedings in a federal or state court. The Department of Justice will even provide them legal representation if necessary. So please don't think if they are in a protective class that they may not have access to the funds for a lawsuit. The Department of Justice will fully and financially support their claims to make absolutely sure that they are represented appropriately. Look, this is all scary stuff. Ultimately, what we're trying to tell you is that you need to be more self-conscious and more aware of your business practices and the fair practices that you should have in place. If someone was to go as far as to file a discrimination complaint against you or the company you work for, the HUD will be responsible for conducting a full, comprehensive investigation. If their conclusion is unsuccessful, certainly the HUD will determine whether any federal laws have been violated. But if there is reasonable cause to believe that any of these regulations have been violated, the HUD's going to issue a charge of discrimination. You and your business will be labeled with this. You will absolutely lose your license and probably have much difficulty getting hired in other places where these types of laws would be a problem for you to do traditional levels of sales or business in front of clientele. There's a reason that these things are in place, and these things have been tried and tested to keep steering practices from occurring. You all know what I'm talking about when we say steering, and I'm going to touch on the new NAR regulations that are in place, or the NAR changes that they have put in place because of the lawsuit that they are in the middle of trying to finalize. Steering is, in all basics, any practice by which you are trying to ask questions to obtain information that would include someone into a protective class so that you can advise them for or against moving into a certain area as a real estate agent. It's not okay. Clients, you may have a direct or an unconscious bias towards a certain race, creed, religion, or sexual orientation of a person and not want to sell my home to someone like that in my neighborhood. It is absolutely inappropriate. And while you're asking yourself, Mr. Client, 15 years ago, Alex, I absolutely had a relationship with the buyer of my home. I got to know who they were. I got to be introduced to their family. I got to make the decisions. And that, Mr. and Mrs. Client, is exactly why you're not allowed to have access to clients today. Buyers do not need to be put in a position to where they are consistently challenged and need to represent themselves to anything else other than being financially capable of buying your home. And your judgmental practices and the problems we have had with these things in the United States going as far back as you can think is exactly why real estate agents are critically important to making sure that we are an intermediary and you have no relationship with each other. Sure, there are always special considerations, right? Proving housing discrimination is difficult. Collecting good evidence is certainly easier. If they contact a local fair housing center for an attorney or for some guidance, most of the states are going to provide them with everything they need even beyond the federal law scope to be able to make sure that they can validate their claims before going too far down the track. I can give you a perfect example that comes up all the time in law classes. New York State human rights law protects against discrimination based on various factors, right? So creed, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, expression, military age, military status, lawful source of income. So if someone gives an additional concession because they have an affinity towards the veterans, so they give a concession for a veteran and not for the person that asked for the very same concession just a week earlier, it's a violation. Real estate agents, lenders, clients, let me tell you, your unconscious biases are going to get you in trouble. And I need you to be more aware of it before these types of things happen. Give you a little bit of statistics. I promised you some numbers. Obviously, enjoying the analytics behind these type of things is always easier for me to set in stone why it's important. Expanding your knowledge is going to help you feel how discrimination affects the real estate industry and makes you get a better understanding. So by learning some of these things by the statistics, it's going to help. And these statistics I'm going to talk to you about now are from the 2024 Fair Housing Trends Report that goes back for the last 12 months. In 2023 alone, there were over 34,000 fair housing complaints received by private nonprofit fair housing organizations, the HUD, the FHAP, and the Department of Justice. Private nonprofit fair housing organizations processed over 75% of these complaints at a 6% closure rate from the previous year. It's on the rise. The problem's not getting better. Discrimination that was based on disability accounted for almost 50% of all of those complaints that were filed with those agencies. There were over 1,500 complaints of harassment reported last year at a 66% increase over 2022 and 2021. Over 1,000 complaints based on color reported in the last year, and that was a 35% increase. Direct discrimination because of the color of their skin by either a seller, a real estate agent, or a lender. California, by the way, has the highest number of complaints, with over 9,000 being directly attributed to them. This is 25% of the total fair housing complaints that were received by private fair housing organizations. So you need to know the states that you're living in have a firm responsibility of fixing this problem. And if I was to tell you right now, and you should not move to California if you feel that you would be discriminated against. It's direct steering. It's not something I can even tell you as a real estate agent. And we're going to talk about some of those things too, because there's plenty of ways that a real estate agent can and absolutely should comply, but there's even more ways of how they can violate these acts simply by talking too much, saying things that they may have heard when they were growing up, or something that they heard on YouTube, or something that they just heard on television, doesn't make it any more appropriate for them. And they need to be intelligent on how they are asking and how they are understanding how to protect themselves and their clients and avoiding these violations. First off, you need to know how to answer some of these frequently asked and risky fair housing questions. Real estate agents have to be super cautious when answering client questions about preferred neighborhood characteristics, locations, desire quality of living. Some of these questions relate to protected characteristics and can absolutely cause a violation to be triggered. Agents have to focus on the property itself. They've got all the resources to direct clients to on the internet. If the client has different questions that we can't answer, point them to the internet, point them to Google, point them to some AI engine so that they can ask a robot how a robot feels about it. But we cannot. Let me give you some of the easy ones and tell you how this wraps around it. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Realtor, is this a safe neighborhood? It's really common for a client to ask about the neighborhood safety. They're looking to protect themselves and or their families or their loved ones that visit from potential robbery, assault, burglary, or other crimes. When a client asks a real estate agent whether a neighborhood's safe, the agent's only response must be objective. Since individuals all view safety differently, a real estate agent should absolutely refrain from answering safety questions with an opinion or providing neighborhood crime statistics. You can't do it. It's not your job. And where you got your statistics may not be where your client looks and gets their direction. And it could directly conflict with something they found on the internet, and you don't want to be in that situation at all. It is not your job to provide crime statistics, so you should reference any other site on and do not reference any other site other than Google, where they can search on their own. Alternatives: encourage your clients to find those crime information through some general resources. Look, you can always go to the local police websites. If you are concerned about sexual offenders, obviously there are the sex offender registries and all types of local government websites that can be used. Try to be mindful not to recommend a specific site, even if you know what the local police department website is. Just tell them police website. Any of those websites can also be misleading or contribute to steering, and I don't want any of my agents, or any other agent out there for that matter, to put under that level of scrutiny. They can also suggest that they visit the area with a friend outside of a showing today. Do a drive-through. Check it out for yourself. stand outside of your car. If you personally have a secure feeling about where you are standing outside of your vehicle, then you should feel comfortable about buying a home in that community. But it is your decision, and the agent cannot steer you in any one direction or another. Clients can speak to those people living in the area. If there's a local park in the community, you should not be afraid to stop and ask a question to the masses in the dog park of, hey, I'm looking to buy a house in this community. Anybody care to tell me what they think about the local neighborhood? Clients can speak to those people. Real estate agents cannot. But it will help your clients get a better feel for the neighborhood. Other questions I get: are there churches nearby? Clients might ask you directly about churches, mosques, synagogues. They want a close place if they are a person of worship. However, clients asking those questions might be also avoiding trying to live in a place where certain religions practice too. So unfortunately, we have to stay away from this question as well. There are some obvious alternatives. You can direct the clients to conduct just a quick online or a Google search for religious institutions. It's very simple to pull up your phone while you're in that community and go churches near me, and it will give you a list of every church within a easy walking radius. Google Maps is a perfect resource for this type of information, and they can look it up. Agents, listen up. They can look it up. The same technology they use to find you, they can find out this information without putting you at risk. Drive around the neighborhood, Mr. or Mrs. Client. Do so on your own so that you can have your own personal opinions in the safety of your own car without disrupting the surroundings or the interests of others. You can make your own private notes. They are for you. I always want my clients to feel that they made a great choice in not only the home, but in the neighborhood and in the community they have moved into. But it is their opinion and their opinion alone that can help them with their decision. Next question. Are there good schools in the community? Real estate agents get this one all the time. A neighborhood real estate agent will get asked about the quality of a school district in certain areas. In the MLS itself, it asks us to pin the best elementary, middle, and high schools that are inside the district of the home we're selling. The question seems innocent enough. Coming from a parent especially, or a potential future parent, but still, this fair housing violation is a perfect example. It can lead you down that slippery slope of potentially violating the Fair Housing Act. Real estate agent must be careful in their response because it can constitute steering clients from a particular school or school district, therefore specific locations, and that is by definition steering. Alternatives. Tell your client to, again, do the research. It's publicly accessible information for public and private schools in the area. Google will help you meet your questions' needs. Flip it and ask your client about their preferred school district. Is there a school district or a community with certain schools you would like me to create my scope of search to help you find a home only within that? You, client, can certainly draw lines like that, but you can't go as far as to say, I will not live within certain miles or radius of this type of church. You can't do that. Absolutely not allowable. Performing a housing search for a client based on desired location criteria for a school district does not constitute a violation of fair housing law. If you take it too far and if you build a conversation around it, then yes, you're pushing the limits. How's the neighborhood, Alex? Is it good for families? You got two problems in that one. Real estate agents need to avoid making assumptions about whether their clients have children, whether their clients are married, whether they plan to expand a family. Family status is a protected class by the Fair Housing Act. Saying anything related to their familial status is discriminatory and will deter their decision on housing. The fact that we use the word neighborhood in there can also be twisted in one direction or another. Not all had the opportunity to live in a neighborhood community. They may have just lived on a street. They may have lived rurally and not lived in a neighborhood at all. Some people may translate a neighborhood as a gated community with certain privacies that you don't have in a traditional community. Before you jump to conclusions, which are your own personal biases, you need to push your clients to do their own public search, and feel free to tell you and help you draw a circle around where they want to look for houses. During the showings, real estate agents just shouldn't even identify a room as this would be a nice nursery. This would be a great child's room for play. Look at this wide open space in the background to entertain for your family. Suggest that your client instead look at the community websites or social media boards that are readily available on Facebook, Instagram, etc. And they should then make their decision based on whether or not that community is putting activities in place that suit their needs. Sorry, animal lovers, but you are not a protected class. So whether you're a dog lover, cat lover, or an alligator lover, that is not going to be a discriminatory conversation. However, service animals are new to the scene and need to be respected in your conversations. So question like from your client, is my service animal acceptable in this rental? Or does this community allow service animals in the local grocery stores, etc.? Clients questioning whether or not that's allowed are typically in that rental or multifamily building conversation, but U.S. Department of Housing defines a service animal as any animal that works and provides assistance to perform tasks that benefit a person with a disability. Assistance animals might provide some emotional support that help alleviate the effects of a personal disability. And those assistance animals are not necessarily considered pets. So there's a gray area there where landlords and property owners, and those of you that are helping manage property services, you may not refuse housing, and you must provide reasonable accommodations for any person of disability, including the allowance of service animals if that's what they require. Obviously, agents must be aware that although a service animal is accepted and properly documented, a landlord does have the right to deny housing based on other factors that may not have been met. So if they're not meeting an income requirement, they cannot in turn be upset as a customer because I have a service animal. That must be why they're not accepting my application. You must be open, very transparent as to these are the primary qualifiers that the landlord has requested that you operate under before we even talk about your service animal. Alternatives, most of the time it's as simple as saying if you have a service animal, you can inform that there are factors based from the landlord's requirements, insurance, financial needs, etc., that must be met first. Instruct your clients to prepare their service animal documentation for the landlord or the housing association. That will certainly make it more acceptable. Unfortunately, service animals have been, the paperwork and the choices of service animals have certainly been abused or pushed the limitations of understanding for those people that need to be able to cooperate with you. So try to be patient. Knowing the service's animal size, weight, age, and breed will certainly provide a better feeling around the acceptance of bringing a service animal into someone else's home that you may be renting. So be prepared to have that information. Wheelchair accessibility. Disability is a big one. We talked about that earlier in our statistics. Is the building wheelchair accessible? Under fair housing, physical and mental disabilities are both protected classes. So you as real estate agents must make reasonable accommodations for individuals with disabilities to ensure equal access to all housing. Landlords have to do this by modifying a dwelling at times to allow better access. A landlord may have to install grip bars or ramps in a particular property to make it better accessible for those with disabilities. Real estate agents should know that landlords cannot always accommodate these needs, and according to HUD, a landlord can absolutely deny a request if the modifications that are required cause an undue financial or an additional administrative burden on the property owner that wasn't previously prepared. A perfect example would be to ask a building owner to install an elevator in a building from the 1920s that does not have the capacity for it. Additionally, an owner can deny a request for reasonable accommodation if the request was not made directly by the person with the disability themselves. So, easy alternatives to these: real estate advertising and marketing of properties must be inclusive of this. Do not include in your advertisement that a property is within walking distance from a neighborhood attraction, because walking distance for someone with a disability can be misconstrued as steering. Avoid asking your clients, "What is your disability?" or answering the question themselves, "Are there people with disabilities living in the building?" Instead, you as a real estate agent need to inquire about your client particular needs, or what are their preferences on properties, so that the search that you're doing for them includes those things, so that it doesn't put additional complications for us to get a quick closing or a quick sale in place, or a quick rental application based on your client's needs. All right, that's good for examples. Let's walk you through now what you need to review on your advertising. Your marketing materials for potential fair housing violations is a big one, and you need to be aware. If you're thinking, "I wonder if someone could mistranslate this," they will. Change it. That's your rule of thumb. If you can perceive it differently, yes, this makes it very difficult for us to do our jobs. But if you can perceive it, if the language used by an agent in marketing and advertising for 1 second makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up, you must avoid using it. Agents also have to avoid using certain words that can be discriminatory to protective classes. You got to be careful with your property descriptions, your website, marketing materials, and above all, your real estate advertisements. You have to be careful of that. Fair housing advertisement does have a phrase and words list that you can pull from the NYPA offline, and it's very easy to understand. Ultimately, keep your description about the property, never about the people or about the community. You want to eliminate those types of violations in advertising. Just make sure you always use inclusive language. Avoid stereotypes. Avoid generalizations. Follow the fair housing guidelines when you're creating your materials. Agents, when you are just running at the mouth on TikTok, you better know what you're saying. As a real estate agent, those social media posts that you're just throwing 15 seconds on the talk for, you have to understand those can get you in trouble as well. Agents need to be aware of the type of language that is used that can be perceived as discriminatory. Words and phrases that imply preference towards a certain race or religion or sex or family orientation are what cause this to be a problem. Ultimately, the vocabulary we have developed around discrimination and discriminatory practices is what has caused this. And let me give you some examples that you may not have even thought of. lots of storage space for Christmas decorations. Why is this a violation? For religion. You mentioned Christmas, which is immediately associated with Christianity. Alternative phrasing would be lots of storage for decorations, furniture, and other knickknacks, but do not be specific as to a type of ornamentation. Here's another one. Steps to the park, walking distance to the library. This is a fair housing discrimination against disabilities. Walking in steps is not possible for everyone, so you have to be considerate of that. Change it. 3 blocks from the park, 2 miles from the library, something like that. It's going to have to not, and just think of the worst Karen. I think Karen's still a safe word to use on the internet. Think of the worst Karen you can think of, picking apart every little thing you're saying. When you can get really good at avoiding that type of vocabulary, you will fix this problem and ultimately never have any of these risks. Let me give you another one. Low crime statistics in the neighborhood or safe neighborhood absolutely can violate all protected classes. Crime statistics are subjective and they are opinions and can absolutely constitute steering. I suggest you use something like picturesque neighborhood. I'll give you one more. Family friendly or great for families. Absolutely a discrimination against family status. You cannot discriminate against any of those practices of or without families. I suggest you use phrases like large backyard, parks nearby, additional guest room or additional bedroom, things like that. Small changes in your marketing language like this are going to ensure that you're not violating anything. And yes, let me strike the fear into you real quick. There are people out there and there are organizations out there that are making money from lawsuits simply by reading your advertising online. You cannot expect the MLS's search engine to stop you from putting every naughty word or every discriminatory piece of language or phrase in the public eye. It's not their responsibility. The fact that they even provide us with some of that service is highly appreciated. But you are the intelligent expert. You have to know what you can and you cannot do. Small changes like that and better awareness for yourself. Have some fun in your brokerage. Pull up a couple of your people's, your fellow agents' write-ups. Call them and say, hey, I watched Alex's class today about steering, and I pulled up your MLS, and here's a couple of things I think you might want to change. Believe me, they'll appreciate you right after they stop kicking themselves for making a silly mistake. I need you to be confident about being challenged. Real estate testers are a very real thing. The Fair Housing Testing Program is a program that is set to help fight against housing discrimination. And they will send testers to pose as buyers and renters. And since COVID, testers are not only mystery shoppers directly to houses, but they will call and pick you apart on the phone, hoping to get you to run down the wrong path. Ultimately, they're going to pose as an interested party. They're going to document their interactions with you as a real estate agent, or you, Mr. Lender, or you directly, Mr. Fizbo Seller. So hope you're listening on why you shouldn't be doing that yourself. Property managers probably get hit with these types of tests more often than most. These testers will gather evidence on discriminatory practices by all of these people. They will call to inquire about a listing or even attend an open house, ask you leading questions. Now, with the new NAR rules in place, they will test you to see if they are coming to you as a buyer, are you using the buyer's agency agreement correctly? As an agent, You need to know these rules and these regulations, and you need to be confident and professional when acting and interacting with these real estate testers. It's essential to ensure that the compliance within the Fair Housing Act is in place. It is important for you as an individual to be protected, and it's more important for you as a professional to make sure that your clients are protected. Some quick tips: keep you prepared, keep yourself familiar with the fair housing laws. Watch this video again later in the year just to give yourself some additional support in those conversations. Understand what's allowed regarding advertising, showings, rentings, and selling properties. Regularly check the HUD and the Department of Justice site and your local state websites for updates to real estate and fair housing laws. Attend training sessions just like this, and these types of coachings will help you from either here with us at Keystone, your brokerage, or the real estate board that you belong with. Selecting continuing real estate hours that cover specifically to fair housing laws is also a great opportunity for you to keep yourself well buffered and set up for success. Where do we go? Clients, this is for you as well as it is for us as agents. Who do we contact when we know discrimination is occurring? When you run into these types of things, real estate agents should know how they can call and report it, or how they can get online and report it, and they can also help you get to the HUD online site. It will use email, physical mail, or the online form if you have that capability. Document the incident report in as much detail as possible, and it needs to include the date, time, parties involved, actions, etc. HUD.gov is the primary website for housing discrimination complaint form, and the nationalfairhousing.org, that is nationalfairhousing.org, is the NFHA preliminary intake form for these types of problems for the national fair housing. Ultimately, look, real estate agents and brokers, you need to treat all your clients equally. Regardless of their protected status, they should always avoid steering, and you should absolutely avoid steering to particular neighborhoods or properties based on protected status, and refrain from using those types of discriminatory languages, especially in your advertising. Lots of ways to avoid unintentional discrimination in your real estate simply by using a standard screening criteria. Use the official credit, criminal background checks. Give all your clients the same information packet, and never contract yourself with a client that you feel is going to have a problem with you keeping all of those potential buyers open in the sales process. When we are talking about steering with these new NAR guidelines, with the buyer brokers agreements, it is constituted as steering if you are avoiding going to houses, showing houses to your client because they are not representing at a higher or acceptable level of commission to be paid to you from the seller side. It is steering. I need you to understand it. Now, here's everything you should be doing right. If you went to the buyer's brokers conversation class and you are having the right conversation with them, and they are filling out the buyer's brokerage agency agreement with you for whatever those terms are that you agreed, then they already know that there is a commission that is owed for your services on the buyer side, and there may be a negotiative opportunity from the seller side to compensate for some of that or all of that. But it is part of the negotiation. They will need to be cooperative, as well as the seller will need and want to be cooperative. Agents, I can't say it enough. We saw it before. This is the reason one of the reasons the lawsuit exists. You need to stay open and transparent and explain these documents without dropping into law language. Please stay in your lane. Read these documents with your client to make sure they understand it. Make sure the terms are adjusted to keep your client comfortable. If they want a if they only want a quick document to keep you two in a relationship for 7 days or even for one showing while you develop a better relationship, fantastic. And you, real estate agent, should be open to do it, considering you didn't need to do it before. Be open to the changes that are happening in the organization. Follow your broker and your brokerage advice, and I promise you, you're going to have more security in your relationship with your clients. You're going to have a lot less clients cheating on you as an agent, and you're going to have better business relationships and better business experiences between the two of you. When real estate agents and professionals comply with fair housing laws, it will help ensure equal housing for all individuals, regardless of class. Compliance with these laws is going to help us eliminate discrimination. It's going to stop the diversity and the inaccessibility for communities. Failure to a real estate agent to comply with fair housing is punishable by removing of your license, fines, and a lot more. I personally believe it is critical to your career to understand the definition of fair housing. You need to take these laws seriously. You need to be proactive in preventing discrimination by promoting equal housing opportunities. Stay informed, stay connected to any changes or updates to the fair housing policies and the laws. You should regularly review these practices at the brokerage level and with me. By following some of these steps and some of these examples that you may not have considered, hopefully will help you protect yourself against violations and ensure that your clients are treated equally as they deserve. You would want that for yourself. I expect that you want that for your clients too. I appreciate everybody coming down today. Have a great Saturday. Good business to all of you. Welcome to the fall season, and let's see what kind of deals you can drum up. Have a great day, everyone.